Okay, so Leah, welcome to the Sales Gig, which is what I'm calling this series of interviews. Thank you for agreeing to be interviewed. I'm really looking forward to hearing your thinking. So what I'm trying to do with these interviews is I'm trying to explore with people that have particular expert knowledge, such as yourself, some of the issues around selling. And the thing that I've always been really impressed about or with you when you talk about what you do is how important relationship building is in the context of sales. Yeah. And I know your work is much wider than just this, but I'm really interested in your premise that is essentially, if you create good relationships at work and at home, you're far more likely to be successful. And I just think that's a really neat but profound position to take. So I'm really interested to hear your thinking about how you create good relationships in the context of sales. Yeah. So just to start, for people that don't know you, haven't met you, so just tell us a bit about your business, because it is a different business to a lot of the ones I've come across. So tell us a bit about your business, and then we'll talk a little bit more about kind of relationships and sales after that.
Cool. So my business is called LIFESEXPERTS. I'm a psychologist specializing in sexuality and relationships. And relationships go across all boards, so don't get stuck with sex. And I help individuals and also companies to learn the vital skills they need in order to build healthy and happy relationships that will make them more successful in personal and professional plan. So my work is really about personal growth and how people can learn the life skills that can actually help them grow. We invest thousands and thousands of pounds into our education, courses, trainings on how to be good in business or in our job, etc. But we rarely ever do we invest as much time, effort, money into our personal growth. And this is why a lot of people just never get where they want to be, because a lot of it is life skills. And if you haven't worked and invested in that, you're not going to be that successful anywhere in life. So that's my niche. That's where I focus on.
And it's increasingly important as well, isn't it? Particularly at the moment. You know, I mean, you've got to, at the moment, trying to build relationships with people using things like Zoom. I mean, it means you've got to be even more skilled, actually, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And it's very difficult as well for a lot of companies, because they're realizing how much home life impacts work life as well. And vice versa, you know, because now a lot of people work from home, and a lot of people have, you know, partners and children and extended family that needs their care, their help, and they don't have the same social support networks like schools and carers and nannies and whatnot to help them as they did before. So it's very difficult for a lot of people to manage all of these responsibilities, all of these relationships, and not struggle, not sink emotionally, psychologically, and therefore their work suffers after, you know. If you're not coping at home because you don't have the same support as you did before, and you don't know how to build support in your home, you are not going to show up well for work. You're not going to be as productive. You're not going to be as efficient. You're not going to get things done as you used to, because you now have so much more going on, and you don't know how to cope with it, and you don't have the same amount of support.
And what was it that attracted you to that niche particularly? Because it's quite a specialist area. I mean, how did you get into that? And I mean, I know you're a psychologist by training, but what attracted you to that particular area?
I would say years and years and years of experience of people in my life reaching out to me and saying, I'm in this situation, how do I deal with this? And it's always been around relationships. It's always been around sexuality. And these are not topics that we actually speak about in the world. I have been very fortunate to have had the family that I did growing up, and no topic was taboo. I could seek any information and advice from my family. And when I was a teenager, I joined a youth club that was run by an organization dealing with human trafficking, domestic abuse, and drug use. and I've attended multiple of their trainings and meetings, and I learned so much about healthy relationships, healthy person. What is it to be a healthy person with yourself, and that has helped me get into that field, because as young as 14, I knew I love what this organization does, and I want to do something that is preventative, because they did a lot of prevention, and I loved it. And years later, I keep being sought out by friends from so many years ago saying, "Hey, Leah, is that okay in my relationship? What's going on? How do I approach it?" People that I haven't had from like 5-10 years ago, and they now know I've graduated with psychology and counseling and do this and that, and they still seek me out for the same stuff they did 10 years ago.
Cool.
So,
The thing I'm particularly interested in, I mean, like I said, you work much more broadly, but the thing I'm interested in is this issue about how you create productive, good relationships with clients, particularly in a sales context. Now, I mean, we've talked about this. Sales is a very stressful business. You face a lot of rejection. You're often working in isolation. There's lots of reasons why sales is stressful, and that stress can create lots of anxiety and lead to dysfunctional relationships. So the thing I'm interested in is you're thinking about how you create what you want to be good, productive relationships with clients in what is quite a stressful, anxiety-inducing kind of situation. So what are your kind of thoughts on the if you were talking to a young salesperson thinking about a career in sales, what would you say to them about how to preserve their quality of their relationships and build the quality of their relationships through their career? I mean, what would your thinking about that be?
well, sales, we've spoken about this with you, and sales is about meeting the needs of someone else, not just selling them something that they wouldn't use and then they'll not return to you as a customer. The best business there is returning customers and customers that refer more people, right? So if you're looking to get into that field, you need to really be clear that you need to take into account other people's motivation and need. This is the first thing, because a lot of people have a negative view on salespeople as pushy and not respecting and all that. We've spoken about this, right? But a good salesperson that builds relationships builds them on the basis of motivation. What is the motivation of this other person to talk to me? What is their goal? What would they want to achieve? And can I meet them with my product, my service? Can I help them get where they want to be? So the first one is understanding the motivation of your potential clients. And that would help the build of relationship, because you're actually showing that you want to understand, not just saying, "Oh, buy this, it will help you with X, Y, and Z," and they don't even do X, Y, and Z. But understanding their motivation, focusing, zooming in, and showing them that you understand their motivation. That is the first thing.
And what's the best way to develop those skills? Have you got any thoughts on that issue? I mean, some people are just good at it, aren't they? I mean, but if you're thinking, well, I maybe want to go into sales, but I'm not necessarily that great. I mean, what would your advice be in terms of how do you get better at that? I mean, you must have done a lot of work to get good at that. I mean, how did you do that? How did you learn that? How do you acquire those skills?
That is very difficult to just do in a short interview, but I would say invest in learning what good relationships look like. Invest in learning about your communication skills and how you can improve them. What kind of patterns do you fall into? Do you tend to assume what the other person may want or is thinking or needs? Do you tend to take more lead and not leave room for other people to speak? And if you're not able to listen as much as speak, then the other person that you're trying to build a relationship with and sell something to will lose interest, because you're not listening to their motivations. So I would say really communication is a huge thing, and relationship skills is an even bigger thing, but you need to as someone that is keen on learning these skills and growing as a person and as a professional, you need to take it as seriously as you have done with your education and invest time and effort and trainings and coaching and whatnot to get yourself at a better place with your skills. Everybody is work in progress. You'll never be a complete project, you know. So one of the things is just look at what you've got now and seek how you can improve.
Okay. So that's very helpful. Thank you. So if the first thing on your list is to understand the kind of motivations of the client, what would the other things be? I mean, I absolutely agree with you about that being the top of the list, by the way. That's a really important point. But what would the other things be that you might want to think about?
The other thing is your ability to communicate that you have it, what they need, you can provide it. You have the system, the service, the product that would meet their needs. And you can do this in various ways, you know. In terms, if you look at from the business side, you can give them case studies, you can do them a demo, whatever it is. But it's about showcasing that you know what you're doing, that you understand their motivations, and that with what you've got, service, product, whatever, you can meet their needs and expectations. So you need to basically be able to showcase that you've got it. Okay. This will build further trust.
Okay, so the first step is understanding their motivations, and then it's about communicating that you can address those motivations. Yeah.
Yeah.
What then follows on after that? What's the next thing? I mean, I think you're starting to touch on it when you're talking about trust. I mean, tell us a bit more about that.
The third thing that I think is really important is not to fail your potential client. Don't, you know, in business, they say don't overpromise and underdeliver. But it goes bigger than that, in the sense of, if you're working with someone, try to understand how they've been failed in the past by other competitors of yours. What didn't they like about working with Johnny or Jamie or whatever? Because if you understand that, you know where the pain points are and what would make them run away from you. In the sense of, if, for instance, someone kept pushing the price up and expanding the project rather than listening to what they want, then if you don't know and just keep doing that, so you get a bigger project and more money out of them, you're going to lose them like this, you know. So you need to be careful and understand your client in the sense of, what are they afraid of? What are the things that would prevent them from working with you? You know, and this applies to all sorts of relationships. You know, would you build a relationship with someone that, you know, for instance, let's say they have an alcohol issue, and probably maybe a best friend of yours or mom or dad or whoever had the same type of issue, and you've suffered so much with that, would you be so willing to let someone else with a drinking issue in your life? Maybe not, you know. Maybe you want to help them, but it's not like this in business. You know, it's a little bit different when you're building a relationship where you are selling something to your business. They're not gonna take on board your pain and your failures, etc. They're gonna be like risk averse, not keen on risking with this person. They don't seem trustworthy or whatever.
I mean, I think that's a really interesting point, because they're not going to buy your services if they think you're a risk, are they?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
and,
the other
a lot of it is reputation. That's the other thing I want to say. A lot of it is reputation. So you need to continuously uphold that reputation as a business owner that sells something, and also as a company. I would refuse working with many companies just because I know stuff about them that I'm like, I would not put myself in the same bracket as them, you know. So it goes both ways, and reputation is highly, highly important. Sorry for interrupting you, Paul.
No, sorry, it was me that interrupted. So I just wanted to move on slightly to the other area that I'm really interested in, is this issue about, you know, we've talked about the importance of trust. We've talked about that on a number of occasions. And the issues that we've also talked about around gender and trust, about, if you're a man working with a female client, or a female working with a male client, I mean, there are a whole lot of trust issues there that are really important, and that need to underpin a productive relationship. And I know you've got some interesting insights into that, so I'm just interested to hear what your thinking is about that, because it's such an important issue, isn't it? Getting the trust right. If people don't trust you, that's a real problem, isn't it?
It is. And in terms of gender, women are perceived as more trustworthy. And this is backed by data, There are certain positions where, as a company, you may want to put women in more than men. And this is understandable because depending on the role, they will be perceived as more trustworthy, and their proposition may be respected more and not so challenged, not so bashed with questions and be like, well, how are you going to deliver this, So there is that gender aspect that we all fall into ideas about men and women. We are, as human beings, as creatures on this planet, we are so keen on shortcuts, and stereotypes are our shortcuts. But also social expectations make us what we are. And one of the things that I recently found was that, for instance, microfinance institutions favor female borrowers in contrast to male borrowers because they perceive them as more trustworthy. Obviously, this is a lot more than perceive them. They have their own stats of who returns the money, on time and in full and all of that. And they perceive them as having greater social impact. So microfinance borrowing institutions will be more keen to finance women, for instance. If you look at insurance companies for cars, they charge women less because women are trusted as more safe on the road, not taking so many risks, not getting into so many car accidents, etc.
So from a sales perspective, what you're alluding to is that women might be much better salespeople because they're likely to be perceived by the clients as more trustworthy. That's your basic argument? Yeah. And that often, when people are recruiting, they don't necessarily think about that, do they? So one way you might get an advantage if you feel that you need to build up trust with your target clients is to recruit women because they're perceived as more trustworthy. That might give you an edge, is what you're saying. That's a strategy to get an edge, actually, isn't it?
And the problem that some sales organizations and companies may see is that fewer women are prepared to push as hard as men. That's why the idea of women are not good salespeople, because women don't just press and try to use manipulation and whatnot to get the client to sell. But if your ethics as a company is about building relationships and selling clients what they need and what they want before selling anything about products to anyone who can be manipulated into buying that, you want women, because women are better at communication in general, statistics wise, and are more invested in relationships and are more trustworthy and want to build this connection between themselves and other people and look after the other person's interest. So if you're a company that looks to meet other people's needs rather than just sell, you may do it better with women. Just because of these stereotypes, but also statistical evidence, and because these women will find a way to meet the client's needs rather than just sell them something and after a period of time you lose that client and you don't get any referrals from them.
I mean, there's a lot of people don't like pushy salespeople because of that, isn't it? And if you don't want your business to be perceived as pushy, that's actually a really important point, isn't it? Yeah. Is that, and do you think that is because of the way women are socialized, or I mean, why do you think that is the case?
Well, there are many reasons. Obviously, there are biological reasons and strong social reasons. If we look at it from a social perspective, women are expected a lot more to build relationships with people, to communicate more with words, not with fists, and to express their feelings and so on. It's basically imprinted in women's heads from a very early age that there will be mothers, that they need to take care of their brother or sister, that they need to look after their grandma, or anything like this. So in little girls from the get-go, it's being established that they will be caretakers. And to be a caretaker, you need to be good at relationships, you need to be good at understanding people, what they need, and showing up for them in that capacity. That's why more men would report that they would share with their female friends about difficult times than go to their buddies and be like, oh, I think my wife is this and that. No, they would most likely share it with a female friend. And women as well would go to a female friend more likely than a male friend because of that skill and nurturing and support that they would more likely get from a female than a male.
Yeah. So let me just ask you another quick question. So I was talking to a CEO of a company the other day, and he was struggling to get good salespeople for his business. It's a technology business. And so would you be saying that actually the best strategy is to recruit women, or can you train men to be better at those sorts of skills? I mean, he's got a bunch of people in post. So, I mean, is the solution just to recruit women because they've got great social skills and they're good at understanding, or can you actually train people in those skills? Is that something that people can learn and develop, and can you teach it?
Yeah, you can teach anything, any skill. Obviously it may be a bit more difficult if your workforce is not prepared to learn these skills, so I would say know your workforce and know whether they would actually want to invest in their personal development for their professional success. Because if they're not open and they're like, well, I think I'm a great salesperson and I don't need anything, then you're wasting your time. But I think when you're recruiting, you need to be recruiting based on how good the person is rather than their gender, because otherwise you're just stereotyping. And there's the shortcut. I get it. Everybody wants a shortcut, but it's one, not fair, and not always straightforward. And you can recruit a woman and she may be horrible. It's the whole business side of things. And it's just, I would say, hire based on what they show up as, them being able to meet your motivations and get you on the other side. All of these steps. Do they get your motivations? Do they get your product? Do they know what you want to achieve? Then can they actually deliver? And will they fail you based on what they've got and your previous experience with previous employees? So you can apply the same motivation, show up, you can do it, and don't fail them even at the recruitment stage.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting you say that. The reason I say that is because if you were to look at the sort of training that is routinely offered to salespeople, it will be about the kind of technical part of training, of selling, understanding the product's features and benefits and so on.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But actually what you're also saying is that there's a benefit to the kind of soft skills kind of training that I bet very few salespeople get offered that. But actually one of the ways you could sharpen up your sales teams is not just by providing technical sales training, but by helping people learn and develop those soft skills, which also, actually, the other thing that's going through my mind as we're speaking is they're also applicable to, again, it depends what you're selling, but they're also applicable to negotiating deals with clients. If you've got to negotiate a more complicated deal, if it's a complicated sale rather than just selling a widget, if you're negotiating some kind of complex solution, actually those soft skills are really, really important in that context as well, aren't they? And how, I mean, the other question I was wanting to ask was, how long does that sort of development take? I mean, it's not something that you can do overnight, would be my guess. What are your thoughts?
I would take it back to motivation. How motivated is this person? How open-minded are they to learning, to receiving feedback that will not be always glowing? And if they are able to actually take on that challenge. Because personal development is not something that you do at a tick box. It's something that you need to build as a skill over time. I can hold a few workshops in a company, but if it's just that and not backed by, okay, how do you take it out? What do you do with it? How do you show up at work after what you've practiced and all of that? It's not gonna amount to anything. How many, like every person watching this, how many trainings have you personally attended that were 1 day or half a day training that cost your company tens of thousands of pounds, right? And you walk out and you're like, 2 days later, what did we even learn? That was completely useless. That was just a tick box for the company to share, that we've done something for ourselves. And does it improve the practice? Do the people actually learn something? Or do they just sit and have sandwiches for the day and chew in the breaks and do some funny exercises that they forget 3 days later? So it's a process. It's
so
not
what
a
you're
tick
saying
box.
is that the key is to recruit people that really want to become good. And they can,
Yes.
if they want to, if they're motivated to do it, they can acquire the necessary skills.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And as a criticism to a lot of employers, they approach it as a tick box. This person has this education, that experience, this education, that experience, rather than, does this person actually want this job and are they motivated? Because I would always recruit. Side note, I run an animal rescue platform and I always recruit people that are motivated. When I interview them, I don't care how much experience they have in being an animal welfare activist. I want to see their motivation. And then I'm like, okay, how much time do you have to dedicate to this cause? What's your, availability? What do you want to do? I always ask people, what are you good at? What have you learned, what you're good at, and what do you love doing? Because when you put people in positions where they love what they're doing, they're motivated, you have pretty much no need to micromanage them, waste time on performance reviews, etc. Because one, they're doing what they love. Even if they are not that good at it in the beginning, they have the motivation to go off and learn or ask you questions. And this is what you need if you want to be a prosperous company. You just need to hire motivated people. And if your staff is not that motivated, you need to look at why. Have you done something? Have the company changed purpose and they've lost theirs? But what I'm saying is, when you're recruiting, look for that motivation. Either it's there, or the person is just showing up because they need the money. What kind of an employee do you want?
And you make a good point, because if salespeople aren't motivated, they don't survive, because it's a tough environment. So, I'm just conscious of the time here. So just one final key point. So, if you've got somebody, an employer thinking, how do I motivate my salespeople to make them the best salespeople possible? What's the one big thing that you would want to leave people with as a takeaway that they should focus on if their goal is to create great salespeople? What would that one thing be?
Know the intrinsic motivation of your employees. Is it purely financial? Because then it makes sense to give them financial incentives. Is it purely because they really believe in the product or service you're selling, or rather they're selling? Then focus on that. Show them how how their sales are helping people and achieving what they came in this company for. So a lot of companies just completely forget what is important to employees. Look at the intrinsic motivation. I don't want to work for a company that doesn't understand why I'm there, because that would mean any incentive, any benefit they offer me would completely fail to meet my needs, expectations, or feel to me as a reward for my well done job. So for one simple example, a lot of companies offer child support related packages. I don't have a child, I have a cat. Give me some cat food vouchers. Like, is there a way that you can monitor what will make your employees happy as a benefit, as a gift, or something like this? But first and foremost, know why they work for you and use that to motivate them. Don't just make up ideas of what you think would make them happy, because I don't need child benefits, and I definitely do not need more financial enforcement if I don't see how my work is actually contributing to the things that I believe in.
So it's just to draw this to a close, it's kind of leadership by example, isn't it? I mean, you need to understand the motivation of your staff so that your staff can focus on understanding the motivation of your customers. So it's kind of leading by example, isn't it?
Exactly.
Leah, that was a fascinating interview and very illuminating. So I really appreciate your time. Thanks for giving us your thoughts. I'm sure people will really appreciate them.
Well, thanks, Paul, and I hope we'll do more of these in the future.
I hope so too. Cheerio.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.